Welcome and salutations to a brand new PRLostGalaxy2014 movie rant, presented to you by PRLostGalaxy2014's Facebook page. And this here, my friends, marks my 14th movie rant. Okay, so today's movie rant, after talking all of that garbage I said about Jim and the holograms last time and such forth, I want to do a discussion on some of the Disney movies, because the last time I did a rant on any Disney film of any kind was a Pixar film. That was The Incredibles, because last November was the 10th anniversary of that said Pixar film. Instead, I want to do a discussion on some of Disney's recent live-action reimaginings of their classic movie properties like Alice in Wonderland and Cinderella. But one of the most infamous and particular ones would have to be Maleficent, based on the ever-classic 1959 Disney film Sleeping Beauty of said name, but mostly focusing in perspective of the iconic antagonist Maleficent. You know, 2 years ago, if you guys recall, when I started doing commentaries, when I was calling out Sailor Fag, what's his name, 11, out for calling me out because of my you-know-what, and so forth, and when I started doing discussions and, start mostly spending most of my, consistent time on this channel doing mostly discussions on some topics that I want to cover and want to brag on about, and less of doing anything at least entertaining, because ever since when I started 2 years ago, mostly on this commentary podcast, such vlog stuff, when I started this video series of me rambling about anything in pop culture, including Super Sentai and Power Rangers, I've mostly been bragging on and on and on and on about anything, and spending less time bragging about what's outside of that with anything in other films and TV and such media, or pop culture with celebrities and the life of Hollywood itself at large, because I haven't spent most of that time, or in any of the following podcasts that I've done, almost to the 500 videos I have done on this channel, mostly of the 300 videos that I did regarding podcasts and commentaries and things, I have not did much videos of any further movies or TV shows. But that's one of the few channel updates that I need to do and to address. A couple of months ago, when I had the movie channels, Stars and HBO on active for a free trial weekend on my DirecTV, when I saw what movies from 2014 that Disney did release last year, Maleficent, along with a few other ones, were one of those few movies I did go ahead and watch, and including some of the Disney movies they had released in 2013, like the live-action Lone Ranger film starring Johnny Depp and Armie Hammer, and of course Frozen, and also a few other Disney movies prior to that, like Wreck-It Ralph. I went ahead and saw those movies, spent my time watching them, and I actually enjoyed a few of them. Lone Ranger was a so-so film. I understand as much of it was as a box office bomb in 2013, but I still thought it was pretty decent. But it wasn't really a really good and faithful adaptation to the Lone Ranger franchise. Maleficent, on the other hand, okay, well, my expectations from after hearing about Angelina Jolie playing the part in this film 2 years ago, my expectations with the movie was a bit high, but ended up, after watching the whole thing, went low. It was totally low. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, but after 2 years of waiting for a live-action film adaptation, mostly focusing on Maleficent, less on the Sleeping Beauty aspect, with the focus on Aurora, who is the main protagonist of Sleeping Beauty, but mostly with this film focusing on one of the greatest and perhaps the ultra greatest Disney villainesses of all time. I'm not going to lie to you guys, but after watching this film, I had to realize Maleficent sucked and it wasn't really a good reimagining of the Sleeping Beauty story. Although I did like the idea of at the end of the film that they made Maleficent the protagonist at the end, and instead of making Maleficent become the flaming dragon that she was like in the original animated movie from 1959. You know, if you because of course lots of us have seen all of those Disney movies. I mean, every single animated one from the first Disney movie ever made, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs to currently of now. And when you look back at some of the Disney movies that was out in the 50s, like the original Alice in Wonderland and Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty, you know, Maleficent, this movie lacks the heart and the soul of the original animated classic. But personally, though, Jolie, in my opinion, I thought she was an okay, as much as of all the things I've said about Angelina Jolie in the past, despite the many movies she has been in for throughout the last 2 decades, it's just, she was a good choice for the role, but I just did not like the way how her performance of Maleficent was written. There was a few things that I hated about this movie, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about that. But there were barely, when I look back at this movie now, there's barely any positives about this movie. There's barely anything positive that I need to point out and note about. Because there wasn't really anything about this movie that I actually liked other than, well, it took some retcon homages from the 1950s animated original. Plus, not only that, the backstory, because in the original animated film, I don't even recall when I was watching the original animated movie that Maleficent's backstory was ever brought up about how did she lose her fairy wings. That was never brought up in the original animated movie, I don't suppose. But here in this live-action, dark, gritty reimagining of this, if this movie should have been better off having a PG-13 rating and not a PG rating, despite that this movie was as dark and gritty as it was for a PG-rated reimagining of Sleeping Beauty, Maleficent as well. This film should have better off having a PG-13 rating when it first came out in 2014 last year in May. But I digress. I totally digressed. It wasn't very good. This movie just wasn't good. In my opinion, it just really wasn't good. I'll point out some things that, even though this may sound like nitpicking when I talk about some of the negative stuff about it, but I just don't think it was all that good of a film. I mean, you have Maleficent blurring between the lines of good and evil when knowing that, that should have been left to female characters in fiction, in popular fiction, where most of the majority of them, where most of the majority of those female villains, including Maleficent, were always considered villains. And seeing half of those female characters that I can foremention, most predominantly Catwoman from Batman / the DC universe, would blur between the line of good and evil. Sometimes she's a good person, in some incarnations she is a bad person, but knowing in all incarnations Catwoman is a villain. But Maleficent, in terms of Disney villains, she usually, is better off seeing Maleficent as a badass, villain. And instead, this movie decided to, despite this again being a reimagining and perspective in the point of view of the villain, the iconic Disney villain played by Jolie, they decided to make her have some sort of a niceness, goodness to her character. And I don't think that was a good idea, because you see, when I watched the movie months ago on, I think, Encore, Stars, or Stars Edge, or any other, premium movie channel that was airing the movie, I didn't really think the film was okay. I didn't really like that they made her a good person at the end. They should have just made Maleficent like her original animated counterpart, where she was always evil throughout the whole film. From when you were first introduced to her, when she was talking to, when she was telling the Moors and such about Princess Aurora at the time of her birth, and when she shows up about this spinning wheel, you know, by the time at Aurora's 16th birthday, that when she touches the pin to the spinning wheel, she'll be in frozen slumber, which would be in this case death, according to the original story. And all the way to, like in the original, she turns into the fire-breathing, flaming, black and green colored tinted dragon to attack Prince Philip, or I think that was the name of the prince's name, I think, because, you know, I just lost track. But it was just absolute wrong, just changing the character's backstory. And well, you know, like I've said in a few videos prior before, and including when I'm discussing movies, I don't mind some reimaginings of certain things. Where, unlike most people, where, you know, most of the majority of reimaginings of classic films and properties, whenever you say you don't like the reimaginings of, like, you know, like the recent reimaginings of films like, you know, Fright Night, The Evil Dead, Nightmare on Elm Street, RoboCop, Alice in Wonderland 2010, Cinderella this year in 2015, or Poltergeist, and any kind of movie reimagining of a classic property. Everybody has a bitch fit about reimaginings because they don't like certain changes from the original, because the original will still remain superior while the reimagined, reboot, remake, rehash is inferior. Or it should have just been thrown away. And because, well, you see, when you look at the original, you see the different, you know, something I never did in consensus of this, you know, constructing a response to people who just don't like reimaginings and reboots, is that, but when you have a reimagining of a classic property, because you see, when people see a reimagining of any familiar movie that they still love, whether if it's a horror movie or an action film that does need an update, or a very iconic science fiction film like RoboCop or The Terminator, some people are like, I'll see the remake, but it's not going to be as great as the original, or I'll see the remake, but I'm not going to say it's one of the best ones, or I'm not seeing the remake, it sucks, nothing beats the original. And that's a fact. But for anyone who is a fan of Disney movies, Alice in Wonderland, in my opinion, after watching I only saw about half and half of that Tim Burton remake of Alice in Wonderland from 5 years ago, and what I thought of it was kind of dull. I mean, yeah, you got Johnny Depp as the Mad Hatter and such like that, but I didn't really like the reimagining of Alice in Wonderland from 5 years ago just one bit. Maleficent to me was just worse, because as much as I actually liked the overall visual aesthetic with the CG effects and everything in the film, the story itself wasn't well contrived, in my opinion. And then also, what I also hated about the film's re-changing of the characters of Maleficent and Princess Aurora is that they made Maleficent the fairy godmother, if you will, of Aurora. And when has even in the original animated film or in all Sleeping Beauty related media, has Maleficent ever been a fairy godmother or some kind of step parent to Princess Aurora? Never. When has that ever been established in the source material, in the original source material? When? I want to know, Disney. I want to know. I want to know if that has ever been capitalized in the original material. I want to know. And not to mention, there are some really... Okay, I hate to say this. I hate to say this term, this L word, but this film, out of all Disney movies I have watched, either live action or animated, I would never really would guess. It would be anyone's guess that Maleficent and Aurora has this little lesbian thing between the two. The whole fairy godmother, fairy god daughter lesbianism over undertones in this film. And this film is also perhaps purely sexist in my mind as a male viewer and a male Disney fan who likes some female Disney characters, especially those of the female Disney villains. And the way how you mean to tell me in this version of Maleficent of Sleeping Beauty, that Maleficent is a lesbian and so is Princess Aurora, and then you're portraying the male characters who are like supporting more likely antagonistic characters, like they are the enemy of the female population, when knowing Aurora and the pixie characters and Maleficent are the only female characters in the film that are the protagonists, while the Moors and as well as the other such male characters are the antagonists. And if you were, imagine if you were to go back in time when the original animated film was released in 1959. Imagine if you were to have Maleficent and Aurora with this lesbian, third world feminist, sexist viewpoint of those two characters, and they hate men. And if Aurora didn't have the prince to, when the prince defeats Maleficent in her dragon form, and when the prince kisses Maleficent for true love's first kiss, you would think that the prince wouldn't have no affections for Aurora, and Aurora wouldn't have no affections for the prince. Just imagine back in the just think about it. If you were to go back in time, redo the 1959 animated original, and dispose if you were to do that. But I just hated the way how they depict Maleficent and Aurora as lesbian characters. Again, I don't mind the lesbian and gay stuff, but that's not what their characters were. And it's like the power of true love, even according to, I have to requote this from the honest trailer for Maleficent. Now, if you want to see the honest trailer for Maleficent, go to Screen Junkies' channel. If you already seen Screen Junkies' honest trailer for Maleficent, good for you. But I hated the honest truth of the fact, the power of true love is between two girls in this film. And it's just the feminist point of view that kind of did ruin Maleficent's character for me. And it even ruined my liking of the character. Now, if you look at the Maleficent from Once Upon a Time, the show on ABC that just aired its fourth season, going on fifth season, the Maleficent from that season, the Maleficent from the series, mostly during the fourth season, at least season 4 of Once Upon a Time got Maleficent's look right, but in her earlier appearance, Maleficent didn't really look exactly like Maleficent to me. It looked more like, it was like, I don't know who to expect out of that incarnation then. But at least the Maleficent in Once Upon a Time acts exactly what Maleficent is. She was evil. She was calculating. She was very malice, and she was a very vicious evil queen of all time. And but here with Jolie's version, it's like, she was evil in the beginning. And then when she meets Aurora in her little dark forest and such and all that, and when she deals with the Moors again at the end in the climax, she's the good guy. That's not good reimagining of the writing. I really did not like that. I purely did not like that at all. And not to mention, there was one particular, if not powerful, scene in the whole film, mostly in the beginning of the film. If you when the movie goes into 19-20 minutes into the film, a horrifying rape scene where one of the male characters, if not Moors, I suppose, would rape Maleficent of her fairy wings. And that's something. And also, you know, as much as Disney can have some of these dark themes behind their ever family friendly films, either both in live action or animated medium, despite Maleficent being a dark fairy tale opera reimagining of the classic story, there is themes of mutilation and rape in such in this, as the film is a, you know, rape revenge fantasy. What, you know, it's despicable in with Maleficent's actions in the film. You know, this film should have just better off with, again, like I said in the beginning of this video, she should have just been, you know, this film should have been better off rated PG-13 and not PG. What PG movie have I ever seen scenes of depiction of mutilation and rape? I don't know any PG rated film besides this, but I've seen plenty of R-rated movies, especially those in the science fiction genre, like RoboCop or the Terminator, where there are scenes of mutilation, and even PG and PG-13 films like Star Wars, most likely Star Wars Episode 3, where Anakin Skywalker was mutilated after being burntly scarred after his fatal battle with Obi-Wan, when Anakin was still under the dark side, was falling under the influence of the dark side of the Sith and such, when he was reborn as Darth Vader, when he was mutilated to cover his entire body and face up after those fatal burns and with mutilation. And, well, actually, when I did witness the horror that Maleficent went through with the rape of her wings, well, though not to mention that Stefan drugged Maleficent and removed her wings while she was asleep when she was unconscious, and then the next morning she wakes up, her wings are gone. And it had to be some sort of a move of female empowerment to her character. Yeah, as realistic as this film was, it really had some themes of realism to this story, to the Sleeping Beauty story. Now, if I did a movie akin to this, and if I have a female villain, a popular female villain from any franchise, and if I were to do a personal reimagining movie of that character, and that movie was mostly focused on her character, if it was either an origin story or any kind of, or like a film set in present day tense, not an origin story, then I would take some of those take that moment as an influence. But do you really think it's really necessary to have a metaphor of rape in a Disney film? I can see if this was a science fiction film or any kind of fantasy film where there would have some rape, a scene of rape to that movie. Yeah, it would be horrifying to watch, but at least the movie doesn't have any blood effects or anything in this film. I mean, if Maleficent was Disney's ever R-rated film, if this movie was rated R and you had scenes where Maleficent was raped, there was blood behind her back and everything, yeah, that would be horrifying for the kids to watch. And the adult viewers would take some mature sense to it, but the kids would not, because kids wouldn't handle it and wouldn't tolerate it and be so mature about that. This was going to be frightening. And, again, this sexism stuff, I think this is one of the few problems I had with Maleficent when I was watching the movie in my initial watching, and my current rewatching of this film. It's just pure sexism. It's total sexist that you have the male characters like they're the enemy. The female characters are, look. I mean, this is one of those few. This movie is like one of the few examples of female empowerment right now. I mean, like what's going on with women in sports, women in television right now. There's like a huge revolution with women right now. And this film is one of those few examples, as well as movies like Sucker Punch that came out years prior to this. Where there is female empowerment, and even that B movie film with Julia Voth, Bitch Slap, that was total female empowerment in film. And I understand Hollywood's current fascination of empowering women to be, well, knowing that we need stronger female characters and not female characters who is always, the side characters, the weaker gender based characters that has always been the boyfriend or wife of the male protagonist and such like that. Because, seriously, I just really did not like the fact, like, again, I just did not like the movie for not following the original animated classic, and ultimately being more, to me, it was, in the thing, some critics and reviewers and commenters thought that the film was less feminist and reductive compared to his 1959 animated movie counterpart. I say it is more feminist and somewhat reductive compared to his 1959 counterpart. Because do you really think we should have her be, this unhinged, like, sort of a rapist and all of that? Whatever. I just hated it. Of course, this film also dealt with abuse. There were some themes of abuse to the story. And not to mention about the relationship, well, the whole relationship between, and something I never covered was the relationship between Maleficent and Aurora with the theme of adoptive parental love. This sounds more like adoptive parental love with more like adoptive lesbianism of parental love in that context, in my opinion. Because whenever I see, like, like in that scene when Aurora just touched the spinning wheel, when she touched the spinning wheel of death by her 16th birthday, when the prince kissed her, he had no effect. So this is like a sign that, he has no affections for the, for the princess at all. That's like saying, screw the princess, someone else should take over. I'd rather be with a gay prince instead. There is themes of gayism in this film as well, not to mention, again, since the LGBT's equal rights with the heterosexuals such has happened since June, so I have to stop talking negatively about the gay community, because seriously, I'm just pretty speechless of this movie. I mean, the strong themes of rape and adoptive parental love and all of that. I mean, I'm just currently having a hard time discussing this movie. I mean, if this was Alice in Wonderland 2010 right now, and I discuss some of the central themes behind it, or Cinderella 2015, then I would do that. Or if it was some sort of other movie reimagining of a classic story of science fiction, fantasy, or any kind, then I would do that. But I don't like to, when I discuss movies, I don't like to overanalyze themes and characters. I just watch the movie just for the characters, watch some movies for the special effects, watch some movies for some of the stories, from first act, second act, third act, climax. Watch the movies for either some of the other stuff, like the film's music scores and such, and whatever else, the production design for any of all things. So I don't, or if it's a certain movie with a certain actor or actress that I like, I'll watch it, and so forth. Something that other people do. But I'm not like those kind of people. Like, again, like I said back in one of my past movie rants, I'm not Captain Logan of Geekvolution or anyone like that. Or I'm not, and hell, I'm not the nostalgia critic. So don't tell me I'm trying to be like any of those guys. Okay, I'm not. I'll never will be. But it's just, I just really, 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 really did not enjoy this film. It was a bad reimagining. It's just a very bad reimagining. Yeah, I like the film for being dark and all of that, but to me, it wasn't. To me, I'm not going to say it's going to be. To me, I say it's not really as dark as some of Disney's past films that was kind of dark and edgy to its decree. Like, for example, like some of the past animated Disney films that was dark. like The Hunchback of Notre Dame, one of my top favorite animated Disney films, despite how dark and operatic that film was. Or if you look at films like, let's see, okay, those films where they were dark and they were, edgy for their time, but yet, yeah, despite that being one of the darkest films. But when you talk about dark live action Disney films like Maleficent or Alice in Wonderland 2010, despite albeit with that film being directed by yours truly, Tim Burton himself in that project. I would have loved it though. And speaking of which, I would have loved it if Tim Burton ever did Alice in Wonderland. I mean, not Alice in Wonderland. He already did that. I mean, Maleficent. If Tim Burton was to do his reimagining of the Sleeping Beauty story in a more twisted way, like how Burton always does his films, being creepy and odd, but yet beautifully artistic, like he always did with his movies like Beetlejuice, the Batman movies, and Mars Attacks, and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Corpse Bride, The Nightmare Before Christmas, and those movies. If he was to do the Maleficent movie, I would have give the movie props for the film's direction by Burton if Tim Burton was to direct this film. But he dropped out, according from what I've heard from the production notes on the film, about who was going to direct, write, produce, and such of that, and who could have been the part of Maleficent and whatever else. But yeah, that's just my thoughts. And also, speaking of which, Angelina Jolie again. Now, Jolie, she, in my perspective, I said this back in my earlier perspective. Originally, when I heard that Angelina Jolie was going to play Maleficent in this film, I had some mixed feelings about her playing the character in the past, 2 years ago. Around the time when the movie was announced to be made. But when the movie was announced to be made, and when I saw teaser trailers, promo TV spots, and everything, and other such about the film, and seeing Jolie in costume on set pics that they did, on-set dailies that they posted on Entertainment Weekly and People Magazine and such like that, IGN. And as soon as when I saw her in costume, I was like, I think this is kind of promising, because as much as I wasn't a big fan of Angelina Jolie, despite her being still to this day, after 2 decades of her rise from being a wild child, of a star to a current more mature and sophisticated and complex actress of now, I just wasn't really that big on Jolie, despite her powerhouse star status as an actress in Hollywood. Yeah, despite her being the daughter of actor John Vaught himself, but I just wasn't really that big on Angelina Jolie, in her past movies. But looking at her now, yeah, she has changed since then. In movies, like Mr. and Mrs. Smith and the Tomb Raider movies, and all of those movies that she did. She has, Angelina has came a long way. She has came a long road from movies that were her ups, her downs, and her midpoints. Maleficent, to me, is her midpoint movie, in my opinion. In one of my top Angelina Jolie films. Though, I would have liked it after watching the movie, after hoping the movie was going to be good when it came out. I was expecting the movie to be on my top list of my top 10 or so Angelina Jolie movies list. But I decided to put it in between to almost near to the bottom list of movies that she did. That was going to be my bottom list. Because of the things that I just didn't really enjoy of this film, I wanted to put it at the top, put this film at the top, but I decided to put it at the midpoint in between list. If I can go ahead and say which Angelina Jolie movie is my top number 1, would have to be Salt. The second would be Changeling, and the third would have to be I can't think of another one, but it'll come back to me. It's my third top favorite Angelina Jolie film. But Maleficent will probably be at number 6 on my list, because I just have some serious, deep, mixed feelings for this film to a near negative, because I just did not like some of the things it did. I just did not like the reimagining of the Sleeping Beauty, that it lacked the heart and soul of what made the original 1959 animated classic one of the greatest, if not but so, animated films of all time. And not to mention, also did not like the way how they reimagined the characters of the three fairies that that raised Aurora, in secret until her 16th birthday. I did not like the way how they did the pink, green, and blue pixies in the film because they were just utterly bumbling throughout this reimagining. Now, I don't even recall if the animated original had the pixies acting bumbling and idiotic, but that's beyond me. But in this live action reimagining, they depicted them like they were bumbling idiots of stepmothers to Aurora when she was an infant and up to a child, 6 years old, 10 years old, until she hits the age of 16, sweet 16, if you will. And it's just ridiculous the way how they just made some of the female characters dumb and less strong and all of that. Whereas I rather prefer seeing movies and TV shows now where you have strong female characters. I'm tired of, looking back, and when you look back at some of the movies we've had over the last years, and even including of the 20 plus years of my life growing up from when I was a child to now, and when I look back at some of the movies, especially superhero movies and some science fiction movies and fantasy films, drama movies, the way how they depict their female characters back then is because, they figured, you got an actress who is a top A-lister or a B-lister, and you got her in this role playing, let's say, Lois Lane, or you got this female actress who is either in the A-list or the B-list playing Mary Jane Watson or Pepper Potts or the Black Widow, or if you were to cast her in like a Disney film, if you were to do a live action version of Alice in Wonderland or Beauty and the Beast, or a science fiction film like Blade Runner, RoboCop, and Mad Max, if you were to cast, to find actresses of those, calibers of Hollywood, either the A or the B, to be those female characters that would be better off being that main male protagonist's girlfriend or wife or any kind of that sorts, and just like can care less whether if that character should be worthy in story or what, or performance. Either way, because if it wasn't for films like this or movies prior to that, and including movies like Sucker Punch and movies like that, we need stronger female characters in film. I mean, look at what the comic book industry is doing. They're finding women who are fans of comics that can write their own stories that can appeal to women. I mean, I think there is a huge rise with women right now in everything. Since back in my heyday, I can't say I'm not that big on talking about it, but there's just this big, huge revolution with women and everything now. I don't mind it because us guys have had our time, writing stories for us of for people my gender, and it's time that women of their respective gender do something to appeal to their gender. As much as they can be fond of princesses when they were little girls up to being fashion models and then makeup and all of that, as grown women. But they need to do something to appeal. If you have females out there that are geeks that like science fiction and fantasy, they can write stories that can appeal to them. I mean, unless if you want to do some lesbian undertones to their to those characters, good for them. But that sort of such. But anyway, in conclusion, Maleficent, after 2 years of wanting to see this movie, I was really disappointed with this reimagining. I mean, I can see how Cinderella is looking so far very better, and even the upcoming Beauty and the Beast live action remake starring Harry Potter alum herself, Emma Watson. So I bet we'll see how the Beauty and the Beast reimagining of live action lore goes. But as for Maleficent, I just really did not enjoy this film. I just did not like some things it did, aside from Jolie's performance, the CG effects, the dark and grittiness of the film, and lacking the heart. But though I'm still going to criticize the film for those strong themes, including the adoptive parental love, and the earlier scene where Maleficent got drugged and was raped from her fairy wings from Stefan and such. And and all those parts of the movie, and the pixies being dumb and idiotic, especially when they were in full human form. I really did not like that. I purely didn't like it. I just did not like it one bit. Not to mention making Maleficent the anti-hero in the whole thing. What I mean, really, that was just uncalled for. If I mean again, I mean when you just have a character who's been a villain that whole entire medium and that whole entire franchise, and when you want to do it, I understand it's an adaptation. When you do an adaptation of one thing to another medium, sometimes it can translate well in some other form, sometimes or most times it does not translate well. But in this case with Maleficent, it wasn't really translated very well in my opinion. It just wasn't translated very well. Because as utilized, having her as a hero was just dumb. It was just really dumb having her being, I mean, instead of her doing something evil, you rather have her do some things where she does less evil. I don't mind it with some female villains, but most people rather prefer the following female villains, including Maleficent, to remain evil forever in any form of media, and as well as any incarnation of that such media that they should do. Because having that character, who was evil her whole life, including a male villain, and then you got them doing something, evil, why have them be somewhat redeemable at the end and just have them, or even be irredeemable? It's ridiculous. It's pure ridiculous. Having them just being irredeemable just, to me, makes no sense in my behalf. And why did we had to do that? And why they had to do that, I would never freaking know anymore. So there you have it, my friends. That's my somewhat half speechless, half provocative movie rant on Maleficent. The next movie rant, I'll tell you what my next movie I will discuss when I need to address a few things on. I know this didn't sound like a very clear rant on a film that Disney did in a reimagining of last year, but I tried the best I could. Tell me now, in your thoughts in the comment section down below, what was your favorite live-action Disney reimagining of recent? Is it Alice in Wonderland? Is it Maleficent? Is it Cinderella? Or what? Let me know what you guys think. And tell me what you think about Maleficent so far. And especially since my channel, for the last 3 years since I started PRLostGalaxy2014, I barely even have a female audience. And I've noticed that most of the majority of those that follow my channel are those that are male, that are also part of my age demographic, age 18 to 24. So I need more female supporters to my channel. I need a female audience, because I understand there is females out there who kind of, discovers my channel, subscribe to it less or comment about it less, and I can see if I had a girl on my channel doing videos with me, talking with me about some stuff, but I just really just hate being alone and just hate not having a female companion, It sucks. It just pure sucks. I can tolerate having my entire audience being males who are like around my age demographic, and even old, and guys older than me, old enough to be my older brother or cousin and uncle and stepfather and all that. But I just need a female audience to grow on, to support my channel. I can see if I was talking about Disney princesses or, My Little Pony or Barbie and that stuff, and, any stuff you girls and such like. But as a guy who is a YouTuber, who uses YouTube on a daily basis, perhaps, like myself, I talk about stuff that appeals to the men, to the male demographic. Like stuff like RoboCop and all that stuff, and Terminator, Star Wars, and Spider-Man and all that. I just need some more support from the female demographic. For those who do use my tongue is tied, YouTube and all of that. So I just want to hear again, as I close out on this movie rant. Just saying, I mean, if my Gem and the Holograms movie rant pre-thought didn't help, then I don't think my Maleficent movie rant didn't help neither. So if there was a video that would attract a female audience, if I was talking about a movie that they like of the demographic, hell, Hunger Games pretty much as an example, then I would. Or those goddamn Twilight movies. Ugh, please. Anthony Mars Jr. on PR, Lost Galaxy 2014. Be sure to subscribe, drop a like, share this video with your friends, and we'll talk about this another time. Or any other movie of my choice for the Movie Rant show. Classic and current. So, thanks again. Thank you, and good night.